Similar Names Fraud, Bankruptcy Fraud, Executors de son Tort. By Anna von Reitz. Information provided to H.E. Cardinal Mamberti and the Vatican Chancery Court in regard to our claims, March 6, 2005, January 19, 2023, in Sikh. Our country used the name, the United States, to do business for itself in 1776 and onward. Later, when certain duties and powers were delegated to the Holy Roman Empire Subcontractors under the Constitution of the United States, 1790, the subcontractors began using the same name. To add to the confusion, the American Federal Subcontractor, our federal republic, also used the name, the United States, and described its citizenry as United States citizens. Finally, in 1850–51, an effort was made to straighten this out and impose some order and discipline. The decision was made that as English is the official language of this country, English-style conventions and grammar would be used when speaking about us. Latin-style conventions would be used when referencing the Holy Roman Empire Subcontractor. The Federal Republic would do business under its actual name as the States of America, even though their citizenry continued to be known as United States citizens, and the citizenry of the Holy Roman Empire Subcontractor continued to be known as citizens of the United States, and the citizenry of the British Territorial Subcontractor continued to be called U.S. citizens. Thus, when our country and our Union of Nation-States is being referenced, we have been properly known as the United States. Ever since the 1850s, the federal subcontractor run by the Holy See has been known as the United States throughout, and the Confederation, which has lain dormant, awaiting reconstruction since the Civil War, has been known as the States of America and seldom spoken about. Naturally, all of this has led to pernicious confusion, especially for other countries attempting to address the various parts of our government, and it has eventually led to open fraud and usurpation against the American government of the United States. The Municipal Corporation of Washington, D.C., which developed out of the original unincorporated city government, has pretended to be the union of our nation's states and has broadly pretended to represent us by using this confusion and similar names deception when in fact it has very limited delegated powers with respect to us. While the city government has continued to call its own citizenry, citizens of the United States, it has spared no effort or collusion to secretively redefine and unlawfully convert natural-born Americans to this foreign political status without their conscious knowledge or consent. They have been helped, aided, and abetted in this by the District of Columbia Territorial Government, another municipal corporation that stood to gain by this deceit and unlawful conversion. The Holy See's subcontractor here and the members of its federal civil service fought on the side of the South during the American Civil War. Afterward, all these citizens of the United States were saddled with huge war reparations payments and other punishments summed up by the non-consensual 14th Amendment to the British Territorial Corporate Constitution, 1868, of a Scottish commercial corporation operating without full disclosure as the United States of America, Inc. Obviously, if the Holy See could find more citizens of the United States to help bear the burden of the war reparations, they were benefited, and if the territorial subcontractor could find more citizens of the United States, it was benefited, too, by having more people to collect from and more property to tax and confiscate. So that is what our duplicitous, dishonest, unfaithful, disloyal, treasonous, and self-serving foreign federal subcontractors did, and their respective municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia have continued this ruse to the current day. As recently as 2019, we heard Donald J. Trump, then President, and for all we know, still President, of the United States of America Corporation, talking about the 14th Amendment. Let's make this clear for everyone. The 14th Amendment was a by-law amendment attached to a thoroughly dishonest, undisclosed corporate constitution, belonging to a Scottish commercial corporation that went bankrupt in 1906. The so-called corporate constitution had and has nothing to do with any actual federal constitution and never did. It was in fact a gross infringement on the name of our Federation of States and a ploy used by the guilty parties to access our credit in exactly the same manner as a modern-day credit card hacker still does, and that is by impersonation. Impersonation involves pretending to be someone or something that you are not, for purposes of fraud and credit theft or some other advantage. These pikers from Scotland pretended to be our Federation of States, pretended to have the power to incorporate our Federation of States, and infringed on our good names, copyrights, and trademarks to pull this off. We have objective proof of the willing collusion of municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia in the form of their Declaration of Interdependence of the Governments in the United States, issued in 1937, and we have the documents creating the Scottish Commercial Corporation in 1868, and we have literally thousands of court records and public documents proving that every word of this is true, and that it was all accomplished by the simple artifice of 1. Impersonating us, 2. Pretending to represent us and our interests in ways we never agreed to, 3. Telling the rest of the world that our American government, and not just the Federal Republic which was the American Federal Subcontractor needing reconstruction, was mysteriously absent, in interregnum, and all of this was presumed, behind our backs without announcing any of it to the American people. We had to hear it from Europeans who weren't even government officials or bureaucrats. This gross betrayal of trust and rampant self-interest on the part of the Holy See, the British territorial, district, government, another municipal corporation based in the District of Columbia operating politically as a democracy, and their principals in Whitehall and Westminster, and all operated as a con game against their employers, is sufficient reason in and of itself to liquidate these corporations in sum total for unlawful activities. Now we move on to the topic of bankruptcy fraud, which has been repeatedly employed by the Holy See and its co-conspirators in Britain and the former British Commonwealth, as a means to offload their own war profiteering debts onto the Americans misidentified as citizens of the United States, and to continue collecting war reparations from them. The idea of making war unprofitable is not new. The League of Nations and its numerous world governments agreed that the victors in a war should have to pay for it, with the result that after World War II the Holy See and Great Britain, and their municipal corporations, and all the other perpetrators of this crime, were responsible for the damages caused. The excuse was made that they were just operating as our subcontractors and that both the debts and the profits of the First World War actually belonged to us. Purportedly, they were just subcontractors, defending our interests under such specious unauthorized drivel as the Monroe Doctrine, and Manifest Destiny, concocted by British territorial municipal corporation officials as a means of justifying their war profiteering all over this planet. They, the municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia, promptly stripped all the assets of the U.S. Corp., yet another municipal corporation used as the principal contractor and vendor of war goods and materials, and bankrupted it. The profits were shunted off into federally controlled trust funds, pension funds, investment funds, all sorts of slush funds purportedly for our benefit, and all controlled by and actually benefiting the same scam artists who have been responsible for promoting this entire gigantic, multi-generations fraud scheme. We, in fact, got the bill for all this, in the form of unauthorized taxation, tariffs, securitization schemes, and other false claims, while other nations suffered illegal, prolonged, and unjustifiable British territorial military occupation. We got the bill for all of that, too, and all of it was misaddressed to us, as if we were all citizens of the United States. 4. Please note that the corporation that was operated under the so-called corporate constitution went bankrupt in 1906. That was and is the only constitution, adopting the 14th Amendment, if, and that is to be hotly debated, any such corporate constitution, for a foreign municipal corporation housed in Scotland, ever had anything legitimate to do with us, our government, or our federal contracts. We deny it, and we observe that in any event, no such document has held any possible power for or over anyone or anything since 1906. That is, we maintain that the prosecutions entered into by this unauthorized and undisclosed municipal corporation acting in our names, had nothing to do with us, and everything they did was done in fraud, malfeasance, and under conditions of non-disclosure. They had no authority to collect or confiscate anything for us back then, and this same corporation has been defunct since 1906. So there is no excuse for continuing to pretend that any such document as the Corporate Constitution of 1868 continues to have any meaning or authority, even for municipal corporation employees. These actions, including the bankruptcies, are all conceived in fraud and impersonation. We were made to pay for the war expenses and damages and for the illegal occupation of all these other countries, while the guilty foreign municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia enjoyed the control and benefit from all the profits. Far from being discouraged by the results of World War II, the miscreants embarked on hundreds of unauthorized mercenary wars in our names and have engaged in endless financial and political manipulations, acting as paid mercenaries to topple legitimately elected governments that weren't friendly to their commercial overtures, and otherwise spreading violence and criminality worldwide, including here in this country, where these municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia have engaged in merciless, long-term racketeering against the people of this country, while engaging in continual war profiteering and illegal military occupation abroad. These lawless acts of fraud and impersonation and mercenary violence have all been carried out by municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia, operating under such ridiculous authorities as the 14th Amendment of a defunct foreign commercial corporation constitution, a corporation that had no contract with us, that operated in fraud throughout its existence, and which has been officially dead and gone since 1906, taking its 14th Amendment with it. We wish for all the municipal corporations in the District of Columbia to be liquidated for unlawful activities, as it is required under ecclesiastical law, and we wish for the purloined land, physical assets and credit, as well as the assets of all these run-amok corporations, to be forfeit to the immediate control of our actual American government for the benefit and succor of all the living people who have suffered. We also wish for the immediate removal of all but key transition personnel who have acted as executors de son tort during our purported absence. This includes the members of the bar associations operating so-called military district courts, and associated municipal district courts created beginning in 1865, and all their various state-of-state franchises. None of this was ever authorized on our land and soil, and all federal subcontractors have cause to know it. The living people must be given a true and accurate accounting of these offenders and the municipal corporations that spawned and misdirected them, so that there is no longer any code of secrecy for these criminals to employ or hide behind. Their methods must be wide open to public scrutiny so that no such actors can ever sneak in and pretend to be associated with the lawful government again. All their unjust enrichment stands forfeit, along with their titles, their credit debit currencies, any unauthorized and duplicitous digital currencies they have developed, the QFS, quantum financial system, their stocks and bonds and securities and slush funds, all of which must be placed under the control of the lawful government of this country and liquidated, disposed of, placed under our management for the actual benefit of the actual victims of all this commercial corporation chicanery. The governments of Great Britain, and particularly, the government of Westminster, must be exposed for their part in this illegal, immoral, and unlawful rampage of commercial impersonation, fraud and gluttony, violence, gross breach of trust, and misrepresentation. The territory of the District of Columbia belongs to the United States, not the United States, and the United States, another run-amok municipal corporation located in the District of Columbia, has been styling itself as an independent, international city-state, with no authorization or agreement from us that any such entity should exist or be on our shores. Please note that the use permits that we and our states of the Union issued to accommodate delivery of services under the delegation of powers approved by the various federal constitutions does not approve the existence of any independent, international city-state. It authorizes the existence of a city, that of Washington, D.C., and it makes the members of the 1787 Congress, the members of the Federal Republic Congress, a plenary oligarchy for the purpose of administering it as a neutral capital city and seat of government for the conduct of business between the states, the federal subcontractors, and foreign governments. No other purpose. The Territorial Congress was never granted any authority related to this creation of a separate, federal, capital authorized by the federal constitutions, except to support it and protect it, and so, any municipal Congress operated by the members of the Territorial Congress in our purported absence had no authority to assume the existence of any other or additional or implied plenary powers, apart from the explicit intended purpose of maintaining a neutral federal capital city, self-evident in the discussions leading up to the adoption of these provisions. We wish for the removal and liquidation of the municipal corporation's independent, international city-state, as an unauthorized, non-consensual development promoted by parties that were not principals and not the actual delegates holding any plenary powers over the city of Washington, D.C., and we further note that no plenary powers apart from the purposes stipulated and discussed, can be assumed by any Congress, ever. Although our American government has always retained its operations in Pennsylvania and continues to do so, the creation of a federal capital was necessary to expedite and organize federal functions after the approval of the federal constitutions. This federal capital should not be mistaken for the actual capital of this country, and our municipal corporation subcontractors should not be mistaken for us. In the absence of our American Federal Subcontractor, known informally as the Federal Republic, those tasks and authorities delegated to it by us, naturally return to us, the delegators, by operation of law. It was and is the moral and contractual duty of all federal subcontractors to fully inform us as their employers and within the parameters of their own service contracts, to assist us in restoring our fully functioning governmental instrumentalities. That assistance was purposefully and in self-interest withheld. This creates a gross breach of trust, an evasion of contractual obligation, and is a crime of state under our venerable international treaties. We demand the permanent liquidation of the offending municipal corporations together with their state-of-state franchises, and the removal of the offending municipal and territorial officials and agents and subcontractors. Except for necessary transition personnel, they all need to be sent home. We also note efforts by the municipal subcontractor of the Holy See to give our lands back to the Indians. This was a potential deal with the federally recognized tribes, meaning those who accept the status of paying tribute to Rome, and yet another ruse designed to control assets that don't belong to the municipal subcontractor of the Holy See. Our land, sea, and air jurisdictions were affirmed by permanent grant in 1787. Whatever obligations the Holy See and other principals including King George II's Commonwealth successors feel that they owed and still owe to so-called Native Americans are owed to Americans in general now, and if our erstwhile federal subcontractors feel bad about what they did and the excuses they used to justify it, as they should, it nonetheless remains their debt, their responsibility, and their obligation to pay, not ours. Our land, sea, and air jurisdictions belong to the actual states of the Union, and all the American Indians are Americans born in the same nation-states as all other Americans, having their ownership retained. Any proposal otherwise is crooked in the extreme, inappropriate, and undertaken to foment more unnecessary controversy and injustice. The Native Americans may have been in prior possession of the land, but they no longer are, and they should not be mischaracterized as tribes, federally recognized or otherwise, while pretending to conduct business as Americans. The municipal corporation operators and the principals responsible would be well advised to note that the ends never justify the means and two injustices never equal justice. It just causes more trouble and more confusion and more violence against innocent people. Thus, we also demand the liquidation of all federally recognized tribal corporations as part of the overall liquidation of municipal corporations operating in or out of the District of Columbia, and the return of treaty reparations and war reparations owed by the offending principals, the Holy See and its British Commonwealth overseers, to American natives who were subjected to physical conquest by mercenaries and who also suffered the loss of treaties that the Holy Roman Empire and the British King otherwise owed to them. The only treaties owed to natives here that were honored by Europeans were treaties between German immigrants of the original Texas Republic and Comanche and other native nations in that state. An examination of a multitude of native treaties show that the documents were signed in bad faith, signed by persons lacking authority to establish treaties, and otherwise misrepresented so as to be meaningless pieces of paper. That does not change the expressed intent and the basis that Native Americans had for believing all this treaty fraud carried out against them. The misdeeds, malfeasance, and duplicity practiced by these various municipal corporations and the principals responsible for them has, over time, resulted in the constant proliferation of unjust enrichment, violence, and injustice worldwide. It's time for this long and twisted history to stop, for compassion and justice to reign, and for the living people to take charge of their assets. Issued by Anna Maria Riesinger, Fiduciary. The United States of America in care of Box 520994 Big Lake, Alaska 99652. April 1, 2023.